Hi, now that we have understood wireframes, let's talk about mockups and prototypes. Very simply put, the difference between a wireframe, a mockup, and a prototype is the difference between a standard definition, a high definition, and a 4K a 4K resolution. Wireframes are designed for setting up the structure, just creating the blueprint as to where the elements will be placed. Mockup is a little better version, but little more defined version, where you start putting in the elements and you start experiencing how exactly it will turn out. And when finally the prototype, the actual final high definition version, is as close to reality as it can be. And what are the benefits and what are the when do you use what? Well, it depends on the information that you want to communicate. It depends on the degree of information that you want to communicate, the function, and the cost involved, right? So for example, if you are at the very early stages where you're trying to figure out what exactly should you be solving, and is my solution correct, or is my solution the most is relevant solution, starting with prototyping will not make sense. Okay, because it will be very costly, it will take a lot of time, versus just designing wireframes and linking them up will be a much better, much cheaper, much faster way to validate your hypothesis or validate your approach, right? Similarly, if you as against that, if you um, when you want to get a proper consumer survey, you want to do a good A/B test, wireframes will not serve the purpose, but prototypes will serve the purpose, as against to, let's say, creating a full-fledged app and then testing out. If you create a prototype and make it interactive, uh, using InVision or using one of the many tools which enable in making interactive prototypes, you'll be able to do much more, right? So in wireframes, you just the information that you communicate is very simply the outline structures and placeholders, nothing more. In mockup, you display more details in the form of statically present content and functionality, and then finally the prototype will depict the processes and the entire user flow, and it will contain most of the details envisioned for the product. Like I said, degree of information is goes from low fidelity to high fidelity, and the function of each of these approaches is very different. And the function is, in wireframes, the function is to be a wireframe is the only purpose it serves is of a communication tool, right? As against that, prototype is used for collecting feedback and testing your product with the real users. So in terms of fidelity versus time, I would suggest that you always remember this. It starts with sketches, then you go to wireframes, then you go to mocks, and then you go to prototypes. Mocks and prototypes, well, in prototypes you will typically make it also interactive. Okay, that is, you can actually tap on a button and you can tap on certain places, and the images and the screens will interact with each other. You'll be doing that in one of the units. So to conclude, there are multiple tools available, multiple tactics available to actually communicate what you want to do, whether it is collecting feedback or whether it is to communicate with your stakeholders as to what you're building. Depending on the time, depending on the requirement, depending on the cost involved, you might end up using wireframes, you might end up using prototypes. For example, if you're working for a client in a big stake project, you would typically avoid using wireframes because the client may not get a very good understanding of um, the client will not get a very good understanding of the final solution just by checking out wireframes, but by checking out interactive prototype, he will get a much better understanding of what you are attempting to build, and he might end up giving a sign off much earlier, much easier. So that's it for now, guys. Take care.